and expose the city to liability?
I think that it's best, any kind of legal questions that they take the kind of advice of counsel, yeah.
You're not aware of any violations of law that Mark Regenweather has committed?
No.
City administrator is responsible for supervision and oversight of all city department heads, is that correct?
Except for the city attorney.
Okay. There's a city organizational chart at Exhibit R-1.
Yeah.
That's the correct structure for the city's
Yeah, I think so.
administration. And in that chart, it shows at the top that the mayor and the city council are up there toward the top. The city administrator is underneath the mayor and the council, correct?
Correct.
City attorney is underneath the council, so the council appoints the city attorney. And then all the department heads are under the city administrator, so
Right.
oversight of those departments are the city administrator's responsibility.
Correct.
City administrator being you and your predecessors.
That's right.
That's the case.
When you gave Mark instructions about making sure that Medicare coding and billing was accurate, was there still a finance director in the finance department?
No, she was gone at that point.
Had you previously given her any instructions about making sure that Medicare coding and billing were accurate?
No.
You agree that in a system where compliance is important, it is wise to have checks and balances in place?
I agree.
Does the city have any checks and balances in place on ambulance billing?
There really weren't any in the situation as it was, because Sarah was a processor rather than a coder. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to get at as we make the change here, is that we have more than one set of eyes looking at it.
Would you agree that when confronted with an allegation, the city is in violation of federal law, that the mayor and the city council have an obligation to give some directives to the city staff in terms of dealing with that as well?
Yes.
Were there any directives given to city staff, to your knowledge, or to you as city administrator with regard to the lawsuit by the mayor and the council?
No, not really directives.
Because nobody thought that this was a serious matter, did they?
I don't know the answer to that question.
You didn't think it was serious until early this year.
I knew the case was going on. I didn't know it was that serious until March of this year. That'd be correct.
If that was the attitude of the council and the mayor and virtually everybody else in city administration, it might just be possible that Mark might have the same opinion. Would you agree?
But it's possible.
you're aware that Mark Regenweather, after having served this city for over 30 years, is within a year and a half of retirement?
Yes,
Because people who serve in dangerous jobs like firefighter and police get to retire a little sooner than people who sit behind a desk.
correct.
And you recognize that terminating Mark as a firefighter will have an impact on his retirement
That's
pension
right.
for the balance of his life.
That's right, that's why we didn't want to terminate him. We wanted him to resign. That's why we asked him to resign first.
Well, resignation would not make any difference in his pension, would it?
Well, we didn't want to do anything, we asked him to resign. That was one of the reasons I was afraid that I didn't want anything else that would affect him from the outside.
But you did not know whether resignation would make any difference in his pension as opposed to termination, did you?
I wasn't sure, so I took this, that's why, one of the reasons I went that way.
If he continues as a firefighter, even though he's not chief, he will not lose nearly as much in his retirement pension as if he either resigned or was terminated short of his full retirement age of 55, correct?
Correct.
During this termination process, or when it was discussed, there was an opportunity extended for Mark to file a response or reasons, a suggestion of reasons why he should not be terminated. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that is Exhibit R-19, a letter dated September 27th, 2010, that was written by me to David Pillars. You're familiar with that?
Oh,
You reviewed that letter?
yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while.
Okay. Well, the letter starts by talking about a meeting that Chief Regenweather, former City Attorney Paul Walter, and Andy McGovern attended with the U.S. Attorney. That was in response, I gather, to the letter to the Chief and Mayor Holm from the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2009. And that they went to the meeting, and at the meeting they asked the U.S. Attorney to notify him if they were doing anything wrong. And that there were no notifications received from the U.S. Attorney's Office following that meeting. Did you take that into consideration when you decided to terminate Mark?
No, because I thought the U.S. Attorney's Office was investigating. I don't think they were viewing it as a regulatory discussion.
Do you think that coding for ambulance calls is a complicated matter?
I think it's somewhat complicated.
There's an exhibit. I don't want to hurt your arms or your back, but I'm going to leave that with the commission. And I think you'll find that that's just a part of regulations that deal with ambulance billing and coding. Would you agree?
Yeah, if it's a federal regulation, I'm not surprised.
Would it surprise you that a fireman might not understand all those?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. Would it surprise you if a lawyer didn't understand all of them? May I park these here?
Right there. Tip over the chair. No.
R16. Do you believe that ambulance billing depends on the care given to the patient in the field?
Yeah, I think that way.
And that's after your participation in the mediation sessions and your discussions with attorneys for the city?
And just what I've learned, you know, once, in general, what I've been able to learn myself just from that time forward.
Do you have an understanding of the ALS assessment rule?
I don't have a complete understanding of it.
What's your understanding?
Just someone that is assessing them vis-a-vis getting in the field and following a test. I don't know all the specifics.
Does it have anything to do with the determination of whether the call is advanced life support or basic life support?
Yes.
And what does it have to do with that?
Wait, say your question again, I'm sorry.
Does the ALS assessment rule have anything to do with whether the call itself is billed as advanced life support or basic life support?
Well, I would think so, because that dictates how then the coding is built, go out to the building.
So if the ALS assessment rule applies, the call would be billed advanced life support even though there were no advanced life support procedures used on the call.
Yeah, even if it's being applied correctly.
Do you find it significant in this case that Mark is an EMT 1, having been in administrative capacity since the year 2000, and that other people in his department, including the EMS director, are paramedics?
I didn't really look at that aspect of it.
You don't think that the paramedics might have more knowledge than the
Oh, yeah, I would
EMT
think
1
they would.
department head?
Yeah, I would think they would.
But you didn't think that was important in considering whether or not to fire Mark?
No. That came down to one thing, and that was the size of the award, the size of the penalty the city had to pay.
The city had to pay $4.5 million. Somebody's head had to roll,
There had to be repercussions to it.
and you didn't want it to be yours.
No.
And in fact, there was quite a bit of discontent in the city when the $4.5 million settlement was announced, wasn't
yes.
there? People were not happy about it.
No, they're not.
It's kind of sprung on them, and they didn't expect it, and so there were a number of people that were upset about it.
Oh, yes.
And city council members were taking some heat over it, weren't they?
Sure. We all did.
And isn't civil service status for an employee designed specifically to protect civil service people from political fallout when unpopular decisions are made?
I don't know the reason for that.
Isn't that what happened here? There was political fallout from this settlement. Somebody had to pay a price.
I don't think it was political fault, it was more operational, to a standard. That was my take on it.
You, as the city administrator, when you were faced with the fact that we had a situation to deal with ambulance billing and coding, turned to the department head who was in charge of that department and said, Mark, you need to handle this.
Not exactly.
Well, you said, make sure that Medicare billing and coding are done correctly.
Correct.
And you expected him to do that,
Yes.
and yet you didn't think it would be reasonable for him to turn around and say to his EMS director, you need to make sure that billing and coding are done
Well, I
correctly.
don't think it's unreasonable for him to do that.
Okay. But you expected him to do more than what you did.
Once I found out what the problem was, that's when I notified him. That's when I wrote that on that evaluation, shortly after I had a better grasp of the depth of the problem. And at that point, I felt I was on the clock, or so to speak, as much as anyone else with regards to this. And that's why I took action written down with him
Yeah.
at that time.
And told him he